We're down to the last class with me for this time around on RoundUp. I'll say it now, I'll say it again too. I'll tell you what, I always enjoy this week. I know I'm supposed to say that. Hang on, this could go badly, so just don't. You could go completely off the rails here, so don't do that yet. I know there's probably state laws that I have to say that, but I always enjoy this week. You guys are just always great. By the way, Shannon loved you guys. I told him before he came in Tuesday night, and I said, these folks you're going to see on Wednesday, they don't come much better. They love history. I told somebody the other day, said something to me about my class and stuff. I said, you know what, this class is easy. I said, I could throw raw meat at these people, and they would say, you're the best butcher in town. But he loved his time here. What a great ministry he's carrying out, legacy, and for our family, the genealogy he's doing is just incredible. Places he's gone, people he's connected to. Have I told you what his story is, background for him? He's adopted. He's not a blood Kelly. You wouldn't know it for nothing. He was adopted very young. His family has always been my mom's family, my family, my mom's side. To go out and research the genealogy of the family that you're not blood.
It's not him.
That means you've accepted that family.
It's not him. It's her.
Huh?
It's not him. It's her.
Yeah, the best thing I did for you this week was bring him here on Wednesday. He is fine. But he was great. And I've never known anybody who had a stuffed English rat. So I'm obsessed about this stuff. That's going way over the top. Then you know you got a problem. And then for his wife to get it for him for Christmas. I mean, a year ago, I got my wife a DNA kit for Christmas. I thought that was kind of romantic. The brown rat's another story. So. That you can enjoy over and over and over again. All right. But I always enjoy the week. I hope you got something out of it. I'll say some more about that at the end. Chapter 6, I almost hate to end on chapter 6. We don't have time for chapter 7, and I know I wouldn't. In fact, when I teach this material on U.S. Survey, I never cover chapter 7. I just never have time. It's good stuff. It's also some of these social changes and demographic shifts and racial changes. And I think African Americans coming into an era where they kind of redefining their identity and their literature and their music and what becomes American music. If you look at the last of the section we just finished up, you see black music is just impacting America dramatically in this era. And we're coming into the era of the blues. I mean, look, the blues have been around, but not recorded and then sent out into larger society, larger white society. But jazz, blues,
some people
all those
even
kinds of
dance
things
the
are just starting
Charleston
to more accepted on a wider scale. Again, this is about African Americans.
Did you ever see Fran do
culture,
that? Did you ever see Fran do that?
Their literature.
No.
This summer, before the summer's
She
over,
could do it.
I'll write a short book on the Harlem Renaissance, which is centered here in this time period. Langston Hughes, these kinds of folks, writing about what it means to be black. What it means to be black in a white, largely white society. And then what it means to be black relative to other black people. So, even blacks here recognizing, white southern poor blacks are not the blacks that are middle class in the cities. I mean, there's, you can't just lump all these folks into one big bucket. It's like saying all white people are the same. No, they're not.
How do you research that?
Harlem Renaissance?
How do you research that?
How do I research it? Read. Yeah.
How about Stratford, Missouri? You growing up as a boy, what did you find as first?
Race?
Yes.
We did not. He's asking about me growing up. I grew up in Southwest Missouri, in a little town called Stratford, outside Springfield. Our graduating class was 65 people. Race was what was bizarre for me among some of my guys in my class, not guys I like to hang around with, but the N-word was used. wasn't a black person in our town. Then it's just abstract. Who are you responding to? You don't know him. You know. I remember teaching at Seymour down in the same area, closer to where you're from. Teaching a high school social studies in the 70s, completely white community, and I remember this little kid came in 8th grade class. He wasn't the brightest guy. Wasn't the brightest bulb in the box, by the way. But he came into class and said, I forget how he brought it up. He said, I saw a black person this week. Yeah, I saw a black person. I went to the mall, saw a black person. Well, that life's goal's now out of the way, isn't it? So I didn't know how to respond to that. Kind of, well, I've seen a few. I know what you mean. Yeah, well, I said we didn't really black. We actually there was
So
one
whoopee.
that was from the Church of Christ Children's Home nearby, Fairhaven. He was in school, and I don't know how he was treated. He wasn't in my circle. He actually went to church in Springfield. But you know, I mean, it's just people are so weird sometimes. Where does prejudice come from? Prejudice is learned. Nobody is born with a prejudice gene. You talk the wrong thing. And what's great is when people redeem themselves later and figure out, well, that wasn't right. Well, my daddy taught me it was wrong. And sometimes, again, that's a sea change that takes place over a long period of time. My parents used the word colored. Well, I'd say my grandparents probably used the word colored. My parents said black. I still do, although from time to time I'll say African American because you're supposed to. And if you do, that's fine. I don't feel bad. It's this way. But I was answering your question. It's a white and red world I grew up in, but anyway. By the way, remember, folks, we all have our prejudices. We just need to be aware of. But anyway, this last chapter 7 again, some good stuff here. If you have a chance to read that on your own, please do. You will see on 417 this Marcus Garvey character, who I think is always kind of a fringe guy anyway. But he's the guy who will give us that phrase, "Black is beautiful." I think we kind of think that's a 1960s thing. Of course, they ran with it to a great extent. But he's the guy that's going to be saying pretty much that black is beautiful. Literature, again, if you've been in the afternoon class, you've seen some of that. Movies here, again, just millions and millions of people going to movies. You do see this 1915 film that I'm showing you the picture of on 419, D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. Imagine getting away with this today. It's 100 years ago. It is basically a film that exalts the role of the Ku Klux Klan during Reconstruction after Civil War. Basically making the argument that it protected white culture. It allowed white culture to hang on. Okay, I guess so. Woodrow Wilson liked the film. He showed it at the White House. He regretted it later, I think. He tried to distance himself from it later. But look, even Woodrow Wilson is largely much more racist than we would be comfortable with. Woodrow Wilson. It is in terms of Jews, but look, I'll tell you one thing that was really fascinating in World War I about American black troops who went to France. French people loved them. Just like me and you, French women loved them. She just went, oh. I don't know what that's about, don't want to know. She's being nice.
They still do it.
Yeah, I would say.
France had a lot of colonies.
Exactly. France had a lot of colonies and black in Africa and other places certainly. And so black immigration in a place like France is pretty complex. They just didn't give it any thought. So just where it is. Sorry.
Growing up in Texas, I never knew any blacks. Separated.
Yeah. She's saying growing up in Texas, she didn't know any blacks. This is all about segregation and blacks here, the whites here. Anyway. Okay, I'm breezing through these pages saying you can't cover them, but we are covering them. Somebody had a question over here. Thought I heard my name. All right. But I'll leave that to you to look at on your own. So let's go back and look at 3 presidents in the 1920s. We have 3 conservative Republican presidents elected in a row. I think largely we're looking at an era again that is turning conservative, turning away from the past. If you were part of the U.S. survey course, we would have already looked at the progressive era prior to this era we're looking at this week. Progressive era would have been a lot of what we probably know today called liberal legislation, and social legislation, and government passing all kinds of laws to protect people and all that kind of stuff. We had 5 progressive amendments added to the Constitution. Women's right to vote, prohibition, change how you elect senators, and just all kinds of stuff. And I think after the war, a lot of Americans thought, "No, we've done it already. We already did that stuff. We did progressive stuff already. We're done. Got that base covered. Don't need any more." So they're ready to go back to something a little different. What we have here is sometimes called this era of return to what? Return to normalcy is the word used by this poor guy here on page 409. Bless his heart. Warren Gamaliel Harding, I'm going to suggest that he will be the only president we will ever elect with the middle name of Gamaliel. But anyway. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention this the other day, I just said here in passing. Gabriel Princip, the assassin of Franz Ferdinand, you know what his first name actually means? Gabriel. It's a variation of Gabriel. So that stuff that rattles around this guy, I guess. So return to, again, what he will refer to as normalcy. Although normalcy was not a word, by the way, at that time. We use it today, but it's a malaprop. So we're taking it on since. So this is, we're going to leave Europe behind, come back over here, almost act like it never happened, almost act like progressivism never happened. Let's get back to simpler times, before the war, before all this crazy progressive stuff and all these kinds of things, and just get back to a simpler kind of America. To do that, one way to do that was to elect conservative Republican presidents who abided by this, who preached this. And our first here in 1920 is going to be 54-year-old Warren G. Harding from Ohio. Harding is not a great politician. He's not a very intelligent man. Well, I don't mean he's not intelligent. He's just not cut out for the presidency. When you make the list of the best presidents, the greatest presidents in American history, he doesn't run a risk of making that list. He's just not going to be the FDR or Lincoln or Washington or Reagan or whoever your guy is. He's not going to make the list. He's going to be down there at the end, usually at the end of the pack. If it's not him at the end of the pack, then it's usually Ulysses S. Grant at the end of the pack. But they jockey for that position back and forth. Here's a guy who is a newspaper publisher from Marion, Ohio, gets elected to the Senate, never does anything particularly important as a senator, never sponsors a significant piece of legislation, never gives a speech worth remembering, and he becomes the candidate in 1920. I think largely because he's in tune with America at that time. This is America that wants back up, keep it simple, nothing crazy, reduce the role of government, all these kinds of things that maybe a lot of us might agree with otherwise today. So here's where we get that word normalcy. This is a terrible sentence. I probably thought it was very clever, but probably somebody else wrote it. But you see this in the last paragraph on 409. Here's a speech he gave in Boston during the campaign. America's present need is not heroics, but healing. Not nostrums, but normalcy. He meant normality, by the way. He uses the wrong word, but now we use normalcy like it's normal. Not revolution, but restoration. Not agitation, but adjustment. Not surgery, but serenity. Okay, hang on, that's too many. And he just keeps going. Not the dramatic, but the dispassionate. Not the experiment, but equipoise. What is that anyway? Not submergence in internationality, but sustainment in triumphant nationality. Okay, that sounds like speech, but anyway. He gets elected. He gets elected, I think, because, again, he's tapped into the undercurrent of where America wants to go in the first place. And I think largely he is running against a candidate who didn't really inspire anybody. Every now and then, the 20th century, the Democrats have chosen a candidate who just really is a bad candidate. And Republicans have done the same thing. What we get here is a Republican ticket with Harding as the presidential candidate, and then Calvin Coolidge, a conservative, Republican from Massachusetts. He'd been governor of Massachusetts prior to this. He was very well known at the time, Coolidge was, for calling out a policeman's strike. I used the phrase, he was about halfway down the left hand of 410. During that strike, he basically, he did like Reagan did, if you remember back in '81, where he fired the air traffic controller guys, same kind of thing. He basically is saying there's no right to strike against the public safety by anybody, anywhere, anytime. I think that's 11 words, and it just made him famous in America. So he's going to be attached here to the coat text. On one side, Harding presented himself as like regular folks, a conservative, teetotaler, Christian, these kinds of things. He didn't tend to be by a long shot. He instead is actually drinking illegal whiskey in the basement when he gets elected, in the basement of the White House. He had his own cellar down there. Smoked, chewed tobacco, played poker with his buddies. Some of that's okay, by the way. Kept a mistress. We're not okay with that, but anyway. He kept a mistress during his presidency. He actually at one point got caught with her in the White House. His wife showed up, the Duchess. Everybody called her. You can look her up, but anyway. I don't want to make any comments. But she actually caught him. It's one of those awkward moments. I hope nobody's been there, where she's banging at the door and he's inside with her, and the Secret Service has to come in another door and let her out before the door's open for his wife. So it's one of those not golden moments for either one of them, I assume. But look, the Democrats are going to take James M. Cox. You ever heard of him? If you ever have, you've forgotten him by now, and for good reason. By the way, the irony here is, and we would never do this today, both these guys are Ohio newspaper men. What? What is it with Ohio newspaper men here? We wouldn't pick somebody from the same state. I don't think we would. Maybe we would in California or New York or Texas or something. Anyway. Now, I think the Democrats understood they didn't have a great candidate here, kind of lackluster. It takes several ballots to get him actually nominated. But they will decide to go with a more a well-known figure, well-known name at least, as the running mate for Cox in 1920, and that is New Yorker Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who here is 38 years old. Young Roosevelt. He has not yet contracted polio. He's up and about. That's to add a little more pizzazz, a little more jazz to the ticket, kind of jazz it up. He didn't help ultimately. Harding's going to poll 60 or so % of the electorate here, so it's a good win. Again, I think he's tapped into where the nation wants to go, and he's riding along with it. You can see the numbers about halfway down on the right-hand column. 404 electoral votes, the Cox 127, that's a runaway. 16 million to 9 million, that's a runaway. There is a third candidate, by the way, out there. Eugene V. Debs is going to run one more time for president. He's the socialist candidate. Bernie Sanders aside, we have had socialist candidates before, not mainstream, not main party, not two-party, but two parties, but a third-party candidate. And he usually got about 1 million votes every time. I don't remember whether he was in jail on this go-around or not. One time he was actually in jail. So unlike running and then you get in jail later, he was in jail and then... I'm just saying silly stuff now. By the way, in 1920, what's different about the 1920 election? Women are voting. Women are voting across the country, en masse. First national election where women are voting in every state. And we elect the worst president we've ever I should see what these women over here have to say about that. Yeah.
You got a point there.
Don't encourage me when I say things like that. It makes it awkward for me, not you.
Was that where the
Careful. Careful.
where the term came by, roaring 20s?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. No is the answer.
No.
And by the way, I'm not saying this is women's fault at all. There was, by the way, already this business of sex appeal. Women voters perceived that the man you see on 409 was an attractive, grandfatherly figure.
In defense of the women, if we saw a picture of that Republican convention, I suspect you would see very, very few women.
Oh yeah, he's going to say probably not very many women at the Republican convention that summer, and you're right. We're not. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not blaming it on. I'm not hanging on women. I'm just making a comment. Just to be controversial as usual. All right. In comes again one of our worst presidents. He didn't do much as a senator. He's not going to do much as president. This is a guy that never got his bearings on his presidency. You can see in the last couple of paragraphs here on 410, when he is saying things like, I don't know what to do or where to go. Somewhere there must be a book that talks all about this. I mean, he's coming into the presidency with no concept of how you do this, what he's supposed to do, and he's literally thinking there's got to be a book that explains it. You know, how to be president of the United States. Well, there's not. He will later, I don't have it here, but he will later say, and not too much later, he will say, I knew this job would be too difficult for me. Well, you know, you can be in a lot of jobs and figure that out, and that might be okay. This is not the job you should be in when you figure out, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. Now look, nevertheless, things went on. Look, I think largely what we're talking about with Harding is you have a kind of a caretaker figure. He wants to reduce the role of government, play down the role of government, reduce the role of government relative to the national economy, which is always a question, especially since FDR and all that kind of stuff. Still is. Just let the economy run, put up high tariffs to protect American goods. Remember though, as we're putting up high tariffs in this time period, so is almost every other industrial nation. That's one of the causative factors for what? The Great Depression, the crash later. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that. That's one of them. He's going to choose, and he's going to surround himself with guys who aren't going to be good for him, and buddies he puts into cabinet positions and bureaucratic positions, and you know, you'll see him later on here. Below the picture on page 412, paragraph right below the picture on page 12. We'll flesh this out here in just a second. He's going to be saying, I have no trouble with my enemies, but my damn friends. They're the ones that keep me walking before nights. We're going to see why here in just a minute. When that's the situation you're in a good place, by the way. But look, he does make some good picks, I think, in terms of his cabinet. The Treasury Secretary is not a bad pick. Andrew Mellon, well-known guy at the time, probably better known to you today for the Mellon Foundation.
My feet.
Yeah. Some of these multi-millionaire kinds of guys, you know, Ford or Carnegie or Rockefeller, Mellon's one of them, he's a little later, but still. They're going to establish these long-standing trusts that still provide money for until the money, whatever it is. But anyway, Andrew Mellon's not a bad Secretary of Treasury. He's going to be antitrust. You can all buggy about that, that's fine. That leaves the economy, the economy's open full throttle here. There's almost no government intrusion whatsoever. Now again, that can be okay, and it cannot be okay, even today. Now we're going to see corporate taxes go down. Sound familiar? Just did it. We just did it. But look at the rates here. He's reducing, or he's helping through Congress see a reduction of corporate taxes from 65% corporate tax. Gee whiz. That's incredible. That's how progressive, anti-big business we had become in the previous generation. Going back to Theodore Roosevelt. And, Wilson didn't do a lot of trust busting, but he pushed legislation through Congress to limit these kinds of things. Down to 25%. I think that's down to where we did it recently. Didn't Congress reduce corporate tax at about 25%? So again, we've been in this neck of the woods before. There's almost nothing to regulate big business. Again, it's really kind of a caretaker, hands-off, just let things go as they go and just try to stay out of the way. And when you don't know what you're doing, probably the best strategy is just stay out of the way. Now, unfortunately, there is administration here where some of his guys just aren't going to be honest. You're going to have scandals, throughout his presidency. They really start kicking in and getting exposed by 23. We'll see what that means for him in just a second. Let's look at where some of this is coming from. Look, I said he surrounds himself with pals, and he does. He surrounded himself most closely with a group called the Ohio Gang. These are buddy pals of his from back in Ohio, old drinking buddies and poker buddies and that kind of stuff. Some of them had actively helped to get him elected. They've been part of campaign processes and things like that. But you've got Harry Daugherty and these kinds of guys. And these are guys who are going to be corrupt at the end of the day. We'll look at some of this as we kind of zip through these the rest of this page. Look, for example, about halfway down on the right-hand column. Again, they're starting to really hit by 23. Comes in 21. This is a couple of years into. Veterans Bureau. We had scandals in the veterans at the VA recently, last year or two. What's new? Well, look at this guy. This guy is stealing and reselling medical supplies and hospital equipment. Whatever your issues are with how long a vet has to wait for treatment at a VA hospital, this guy's taking stuff and selling it black market. He's selling out the back door. So if VA stuff bothers you today, well, should have been there. Should have been there back in the 20s. Harding's, and to avoid prosecution, he's going to go off to Europe. Harding's general counsel will commit suicide. There's another suicide with an associate of his attorney general. Shot himself with a handgun. His attorney general, Daugherty, will be implicated in a scandal involving profits or German assets seized by Americans during World War I. I don't have a lot of details for you on that. But he got accused rightly. He took the Fifth Amendment. I mean, imagine the Attorney General having to take the Fifth Amendment because you're going to incriminate yourself otherwise. You're the chief law enforcement officer in the country under the president. Never got indicted, should have, never got indicted. Albert Fall did. Albert Fall was the Secretary of the Interior. Now, what we get here is what usually is called the Teapot Dome scandal. It's larger than that, but that's what we usually label it. The Teapot Dome scandal basically is where you have the Interior Secretary, Albert Fall, leasing oil reserve, the federal oil reserve land to oil companies. Stop there. There's nothing wrong with that. We do it all the time. We've done it all the time. Look, you've got a lot of federal land. It has natural resources on it. From time to time, the federal government will lease land. A lumber company can come in and fell trees or whatever it is, or mine or whatever it is. Historically, this happens all the time. In this case, he's going to basically make deals with a couple of oil companies to come onto federal land in two places, one in Wyoming, Teapot Dome, the other out in California, the Elk Hills Reserve, and they can tap the oil out. Okay, if that's all it was about, there's no harm, no foul. The problem here is he takes about $500,000 in bribes to make this happen. That's the problem. So he's going to be implicated in a big scandal. He will be indicted. He will be convicted. He will go to prison just for a year, but still. This makes him, as you can see above the picture on 412, the first U.S. cabinet member to go to jail while still holding office. So whatever your scandals are today, things are just as bad or worse here. There's probably other cabinet members who should have gone to jail earlier, but you got through that. This is all starting to hit the fan in summer 1923. And he doesn't know what to do about it. Make the press, reported, it's a smear on his administration. Again, he's just frustrated. There's not much to do here but kick the cat. Fortunately for Warren Harding, he will die. I mean, really, hopefully it's a blessing for him that he died. He died in August 2nd, 1923. He'd gone off to a trip to Alaska. He'd come back to Washington or no, he's in San Francisco. He'd come to Washington down San Francisco. There he died, and we think a cerebral embolism. Now I say we think because his doctor was actually part of this Ohio gang. He's probably half quack anyway. Probably not a very good doctor, but he's my pal, And so it may be that Harding had been diagnosed for heart disease and some stuff. and didn't get supposed to be treated properly, and now it's catching up with him. So maybe cerebral embolism, I'm actually saying heart attack, but it may actually have been cerebral embolism. So the fact is, we don't know for certain, because he's got a crummy doctor. So this is where, I'm sorry.
Funny that Harding College is named after.
No, it's not named after him. Harding College is not named after Warren G. Harding. Yeah. I don't know which Harding it was, but it's not this one. If this was the guy we named Harding after, we would have changed the name by now. Yeah.
These are real people with real feelings, and what happened in his life was just almost unbearable.
Well, to have achieved in life to the presidency of the United States, and it becomes the worst part of your life. You know, this should be the crowning glory. This is a bad comparison, but it's kind of like William Howard Taft did not want to run for president in 1908. His wife begged him to. He wanted to be on the Supreme Court. She said, no, I'm going to be First Lady. So she talked him into running in 1908. He got himself elected. And then between the election in 08 and the inauguration in 09, guess what happened? She had a stroke and was non-functional. She couldn't carry out her responsibilities as First Lady. So what her great dream was all about, it was right there, and then snatched away. So be careful what you wish for. So he is gone, and but yet, look, this is like other presidents where the legacy that was starting to hit here, fan here, doesn't catch up to him. He was mourned dramatically at his death. We talk about Lincoln's train, you know, from D.C. to Springfield, Illinois, being lined, the tracks just being lined by thousands of people. Same thing here, the train that ran from California out to Ohio, people just lined it, you know, everywhere. And they mourned the passing of grandfather. You know, the grandfather president. So anyway, out he went. Again, the legacy just isn't quite there. Now, I do want to mention here before we finish this long paragraph, on the right-hand column on 412, we're ending down with, he does make 4 Supreme Court appointments during his presidency, and one of those will be William Howard Taft. William Howard Taft finally gets to be a member of the Supreme Court, which is what he wanted. He was miserable as president. He gained about 40 pounds during his presidency because he was always just eating constantly. He's so unhappy. He'd go down the street to stores and stuff, sneak out of the White House, and I want some of that, want some of that. He'd be like today's thing. Give me some of those ding-dongs, I'll take some of those Twinkies, and give me 3 Baby Ruths, no, the big ones. He's stuffing his drawer in the desk drawer just full of stuff. He's just eating constantly. But anyway, what I'm talking about. All right, in comes the new guy. The VP becomes president. Look at this scene in the last paragraph of 412. Calvin Coolidge from Vermont is in Vermont when he gets word delivered by Secret Service that that Harding is dead. Okay, we need to get you sworn in, make this legal. We'll do it officially later. We need to get you sworn in now. He's in his father's house, the house he grew up in. He's in his father's house. His 78-year-old father was a justice of the peace, and he will swear in his son as president. Isn't that cool? By the light of a kerosene lamp way up in the night. Well, that's got to be memorable. Now again, I'll go through the official ceremony later, but I imagine if Calvin Coolidge, when he looks back on his 2 swearing in situations, this is probably the one that you're going to remember.
Was it
Calvin
a
Coolidge
big
is
two-story
like
house?
Harding in terms of being
Was it a big 2-story house?
conservative, hands-off, limited government. He's a very honest man. Look, I think Harding is honest. He's just inept. Calvin Coolidge, again, just stays the course. Doesn't rock very many votes. Again, very popular, enough to be elected in his own right in 1924. You'll see in the right hand on page 413. One of the big issues by this time, already by 24, remember, Prohibition doesn't kick in until 1919, 5 years down the road. It's a huge political issue in the 1924 election. You will have the Democrat Party split in 1924 between the wets and the dries. You will see the wets led by, well, several guys are going to be leading it, and we don't necessarily have a wet or a dry. The fact that John Davis gets nominated is really not about being pro-wet or dry. But we do have William Jennings Bryan in the middle of this. William Jennings Bryan first ran as president in 1896. He's going to be here, actually soliciting the nomination. He ran 3 times total, by the way. But he's going to be the leader of the dry movement within the Democratic Party. And they stick to the dry position in 24. In 1928, as we'll see here in a bit, when the Democrats nominate Al Smith, he's a wet, which they didn't know at the time. Kind of announced it a little later, but anyway, kind of, why didn't you say that already? Again, in this, and by the way, when we talk about the Democratic candidate here, they are such a split convention in 1924, you will see about halfway down the right hand of 413, it will take 103 ballots before they land on a candidate. I'm not sure that's ever happened to that extent. I mean, conventions used to matter here. It's where you really went into a place to really pick the candidate. It wasn't the fact that you known already, it was just presumed, like it is today. We haven't had a convention really that's mattered for 60 years. The 48 Democratic Convention did. But that's about the end of the line. Maybe the 60 did with Kennedy, I'm not sure. But this is a time period where these conventions could drag on forever because there's not a presumed candidate already in a lot of cases. So he's really, Davis is really a compromise candidate here, a lawyer from West Virginia. There is going to be a third party here, much more viable than Eugene V. Debs running as a socialist. That's kind of, a million votes in the cold day. Look, you're going to have a wing of the Democrat Party, and then outside too, that would say, well, what about progressivism? We left that alone. We walked away from that. We need to go back some of that. The guy that's going to be third party guy here, actually progressive candidate, he's going to be Robert La Follette. If we were covering this whole span of American history as a semester, we would have covered him already. Robert La Follette was a very important Wisconsin leader of progressivism back in the early part of the 20th century. He's 70 now, but he's still out there and takes up the banner of progressivism in this election. He would be, to some extent, the Bernie Sanders candidate here. That works for you. I wouldn't say socialist as such, but they campaign against him as if he's a socialist. They'll call him a socialist. Accurate, but so Coolidge maintains the office, 15 million votes to 8.5, and La Follette with 5 million. Look, I think a lot of La Follette votes would have gone to Davis, but he still wouldn't win the election. So here we are with Coolidge for, again, a full term now. Using that slogan, by the way, keep cool with Coolidge, which is probably one of the coolest slogans in our history. It doesn't mean much, like most of them don't. And again, with Coolidge, we get kind of, again, just more of just staying the course. That's what people wanted. Just stay the course, government stay out of the way, keep a low profile. But there are still things happening here that government's going to have to respond to because there are changes coming whether you like it or not. Now, let's see a couple things that we used to kind of describe Coolidge's administration. High tariffs, what's new? Low corporate taxes, what's new? Keep out of the way of big business. Just keep out of the way of business, period. What's good for business? It's good for America. It's the perception at the time. I think that's a Coolidge quote. He will not support farm support legislation. He got a lot of support from farmers, but he didn't support farm supports. He would say, because the government doesn't need to be in the business of propping up farmers who don't do something. Just the way that was. He just said, if the market is what the market is, we don't want the government trying to adjust that artificially. So he just, no support for that. There was also a big movement here among veterans to get bonuses that had been promised. The World War I vets had been promised to them back in the day. It had never happened. It's not going to happen. This is still going to be a perennial issue for years. When FDR comes in as president, even in '33, there's still going to be bonus stuff. Remember the bonus march in the summer of 1933. This is another decade down the road. It's still those bonuses promised to World War I vets never happens.
Were some of the states gave a bonus to people that
Some of the states did, but on the federal level, they never came through on that. Now, caretaker of government or not, and I think he's more involved than Harding was. There are changes that are coming, and the government's going to be addressing some of these changes. In other words, what you'll see here above the picture of the first radio station in American history. we will see things about the air. Airplanes. We have an almost unregulated airspace. And of course, coming out of World War I, where we have more pilots trained because of the war, okay, post-World War I, those pilots didn't want to fly. And some of that's about postal delivery and those kinds of things, including Lindbergh. But what we have here is Dodge City in the air. So there's no regulation. Who gets to be a pilot? Whoever sits down with another pilot learns how to fly. Boom, you're done. You didn't register, there's almost nothing. So what we have here is the passage of the Air Commerce Act that actually required the registration of all airplane pilots. And this is just the beginning. You've got to get that airspace regulated, as it is today, or even more so. Real biggie here is going to be the federal radio, the act that gets passed that will create the Federal Radio Commission. Radio is becoming a big deal. I mean, it is a growth industry. This is the internet 10 years ago. It's just boom, it's just coming. It's television in the late 40s, early 50s. Boom, here it comes. Radio is gaining all the traction you could possibly get here coming into the 1920s. Look at the paragraph below the picture. What you see here on the screen. This is, by the way, all this vacuum tube kinds of stuff. I mean, it's just these big units, and it's pretty crazy. But anyway, in 1920, we get the first radio station on air, KDKA in Pittsburgh. By the way, there is still a KDKA in Pittsburgh. It's a television, I think, most of the day. Look at that, one station in 1920. Okay, for what? What's being broadcast? To whom? Well, there are radios, but radios are expensive, and again, it's kind of this sort of stuff. It took up space, and you had to have headphones on, and all this kind of jazz. It's pretty limited stuff. It's almost like ham operators were back years ago. There's just not a lot of those guys. You know, it's expensive to do that. So the same thing here. But look, it's coming. In 1922, 4 stations. In 1923, 566. Talk about a growth industry, a growth media. We haven't had this kind of media change in our history prior to this ever. Always been print, always been newspapers, those kinds of things. And this is where these guys are hitting the airwaves. Even in 1926, you will have Radio Corporation of America. That outfit will establish a national network of radio stations, which they will call NBC. National Broadcasting Company. That begins as a radio broadcasting company. It is national. How? How are they broadcasting nationally? Telephones. Like the early internet. Based on phone hookups. Trying to pass along that now. Except with your phone, which doesn't have any wires. See what I'm saying? This is taking advantage of existing technology to expand a new technology. They're connecting very directly here to radio. And enough of a market here that you will actually have two networks running simultaneously on different frequencies, NBC Blue and NBC Red, which they will run for decades. This goes way into the 40s, maybe in the 50s. Yeah, it's been around for a long time. Of course, by then, television is coming in, and they get these shared media of radio and television down to the day. So things are changing. Stay the course all you want, things are changing. Technology is changing. So technological changes aren't anything new. It's happening here. Come 1928, Coolidge could have run for another term, probably won. He chose not to. He said, I forgot it. He'd done enough. So that leaves it wide open for Republican Commerce Secretary Herbert Hoover to become the candidate. The party will run with him. He's very well known at the time, I mentioned the other day, in terms of food relief program that he helped head in Europe. That's how people knew him before he was Commerce Secretary. That's how he got the position of Commerce Secretary. So this guy's a heroic kind of figure. It's so ironic to what he becomes because of the Depression later on. But very popular, married to he was a mining engineer, by the way, by job. He'd been to Stanford. He and his wife both, the woman who became his wife, they both went to Stanford. They met there. He became a mining engineer, multi-millionaire. He had all the money he could possibly ever have. He didn't take a salary as president, by the way. Louise Henry Hoover, very, very intelligent woman. Might have been a better president than him, I don't know. For a while, they both spoke Chinese, by the way. He had been in China for several years as a mining engineer. While they were in China, they both learned to speak Mandarin. As the kids were growing up at home, whenever mom and dad wanted to talk to each other, they spoke in Chinese, which just irritated the kids like as they would. You know. We had some friends back in the day who came from South Africa. They could speak Afrikaans. Their children were born here. Their children didn't speak Afrikaans. But when they wanted to talk, they would talk to each other in Afrikaans. The kids would say, "Will you stop that? We don't understand what you're saying." Yes, we know. That's the point. So we get another, I think, conservative president here, running against Al Smith. Al Smith, as I'm describing him here, a gregarious, cigar-chomping Irish Catholic. Think about that. In this era of Ku Klux Klan, of anti-immigrant, the holdover of anti-Irish, I think at the same time, you pick an Irish Catholic candidate. Now, this isn't the first Irish Catholic candidate, by the way. You go back to the 1884 campaign, the Democrat candidate that year, James G. Blaine, was an Irish Catholic. Who wins against him? No, I say Democrat, it's actually Republican. No, he was Republican, yeah. Herbert Pluton won in 84 against him. So not our first Irish Catholic. But here is, in this era, an Irish Catholic running as president, almost counterintuitive. And then you had this guy who wore, I don't have a picture of him. Well, yeah, I do. But you should see him out on the street. This guy came from New York. He came from Brooklyn, I believe. You can say here, I'll see what it says. He had one of those speech patterns that was kind of this. How's everybody doing? Everybody good today? It's good to see yous out here. Glad to see you all came out. Got to win this one. You know, it comes off more like a football coach than he does a president candidate. So he just had that, and they smoked cigars. Oh, every win he used to smoke a cigar all the time. He wore these loud checkered suits. Yeah, you know, if you remember Porter Wagoner back in the day, who's that comedian? Porter Wagoner used to have, I can't remember his name. He always wore the checkered suits.
Fields. W.C. Fields.
Was it? But that's how I always picture him. Well, look, it just got a different kind of appeal, to say the least. And then, when he's nominated, he announces, "Oh, by the way, I'm a wet candidate." So he was in favor of getting rid of prohibition, and the nation's not quite ready for that yet. So 1928, we're going to see a landslide for Herbert Hoover. He'll take 58% of the vote, 21 million votes to 6 million more than Coolidge got the previous election. Look, this guy comes in with all kinds of promise. One more conservative, and then it just goes off the rails. That's out of our time frame, and we're out of time otherwise too. I hate to stop right there. It seems like a cliffhanger to me. You've already done the 30, so we can't go there next. We got to stop. Thank you very much.